Isaac, it's nice to have you on Lunch Therapy.
It's so nice to be here. Thank you.
I'm trying to trace back our friendship because we met through Ryan O'Connell, and
We
then we
did.
then we hung out a bit. You came over for dinner once, so you've been
Mhm.
here, which is a violation of patient, you know, uh, like lunch therapist patient relations, but that's okay.
You violated it before. I've seen your roster.
Okay, true. And then most significantly, we had lunch in New York. We had brunch in New York, and then you came with me on a trip to Fish's Eddy, where I purchased
hmm
dinner napkins, and I've still
hmm
been using those dinner napkins ever since.
If you've ever seen an addict sort of fiending in the wild, that was really uh, my trip with Adam to Fish's Eddy.
Oh,
I
did
really
you?
felt like an enabler.
Oh, you did. Yes, and you still haven't been back to enjoy those dinner napkins.
No, no, I would love to.
Okay,
Oh,
well, come on back. Well, my first question to you, since this is a food podcast, is
yes.
broadly speaking, is food something that's important to you in your life?
Yes, very much so. Eating it, eating it has always been of the utmost importance to me. It really wasn't until the pandemic that I started trying to do much preparation of it for myself. Um, and like an early caveman, I mean, it was purely survival motivated. I mean, I think once the pandemic started, I realized, oh shit, I'm going to have to learn how to make some things for myself in order to live. Um and so it has become quite meditative for me. It has become uh very comforting for me. Unlike you, I harbor absolutely no curiosity about um cooking. I Anytime I attempt to go rogue, it is an absolute disaster. I need I need instruction. I mean, cooking is essentially just another way for me to be submissive. Like I need like rules. I need like a causal sort of flow. I need to follow everything to the letter. I like being obedient,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and that is something that a recipe I find very comforting. I'm like, okay, if I do this and this and this with this much of this and this much heat and for this amount of time, this will happen. And I found that very comforting.
No, I think that makes a lot of
um,
sense. There's been a lot of dialogue lately about that because the New York
yeah.
Times's new cookbook is no recipe cooking, and somebody wrote an article, "What's wrong with following a recipe?" And it's sort of like,
Yes.
and for me, I absolutely, when I first started cooking, always followed a recipe to the letter. But I think as I started to learn, like, okay, like making pasta, like 50 or 60 different times, and you learn like you add this and
Sure.
you add that and you add some pasta water and stir it all together and it becomes pasta, then you're like, okay, I get the gist. Like I can kind
Yeah.
of, but it takes a long time of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've cooked alongside you in your Instagram lives.
Wow.
I made the spring vegetable soup, uh,
Oh, the
or the minestrone
ribolita maybe.
adjacent, the
Yeah.
ribollita
Yeah, it had
with all
cabbage.
the greens, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Oh,
But
good.
I noticed you were like, well, just a handful of this, and I was like, oh, he is really comfortable in the kitchen in the way that I am really not. Um,
Well, it's funny because I
but
feel I feel like, it's like the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing. It's sort of inevitably like if you spend 10,000 hours just doing something, and there's actually a quote from Gabrielle Hamilton, from the owner of Prune, who's a cookbook author or an
I have
author.
her cookbook.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, but she has a great quote, which is, "Be careful what you get good at. You'll be doing it for the rest of your life." And I always
hmm
think about that with cooking and food blogging. It's There I am. Well, okay, so I'm
Yeah.
curious. Before we get into your therapy, this is still our banter portion. Uh, what was your food life like before the pandemic? Was it restaurants always takeout?
Restaurants.
Okay.
Restaurants. Speaking of Prune, my favorite restaurant in all of New York. Um,
Mine too,
yeah, it
actually. Yeah.
was. I know. I hope it'll reopen.
I do too. Somebody the other day is like, "Oh yeah, that closed," and I was like, "What?" And then they had read that article that she wrote
Yeah,
where it was just sort of like ambiguous about what the future held. But I said she didn't say she was closing it. She just said
exactly.
she's not sure. But you were going to say, so
God.
you go to
Yeah,
restaurants.
yeah. No, restaurants. I mean, for me, that's one of the joys. The joys of living in New York City is all of the food and all of the restaurants. And I'm the worst cook I know. So why should I eat at my horrible restaurant every night with no company? So that was very much my life. Takeout, delivery, and then very basic, scramble an egg, uh, boil some quinoa, make a turkey burger. It just very, very simple, do it yourself kind of stuff.
But in terms
But
of the restaurant culture that you were a part of,
mhm.
were you like a Veselka at 2 a.m. kind of restaurant goer, or were you sort of more like the hot new New York Times 3-star opening in, Bushwick kind of restaurant goer?
Oh, well, I live in Washington Heights, so it's pretty
Okay.
Bushwick is pretty far, as is Veselka at 2 a.m. But I I I've never been, if I'm traveling, I do like to look up sort of, I'll look on Eater, or I'll look on Lonely Planet, or places where restaurants are being reviewed, and I'll try and sort of plan out a trip that way. I do like sort of seeing what restaurants people love. In New York, for me, it's more kind of situation based. I mean, I like a good meal, but I'm not always sort of hunting out sort of what's hot or what's been reviewed highly. I mean, I think for me, it's very much who I'm with and
Hmm.
what neighborhood we're in. And I mean, I'm not terribly particular. I just, for me, a great meal is just as much who I'm with,
Hmm.
and what we're drinking,
Hmm.
and what's going on. What the conversation is, what the, I don't know. It all plays an equal part to me, in addition to the food. So
Well, Prune
I've
is a
had,
perfect like kind of place
yeah.
for that, where it sort of just feels like you're in somebody's house as opposed to a
Oh, it's
formal dining room.
fabulous.
Yeah, that's
It's
interesting.
fabulous. Her cookbook is very intense. I
Oh yeah.
really, it's just sort of decorative for me at this point.
Oh, totally. I mean, I bought it and I never cooked anything from it, and I just enjoyed it as like an artifact. But
Totally.
my friend Ben Mims, who writes for the LA Times, told me,
I've made his cauliflower many
oh,
times.
well,
Delicious.
he told me that the Prune cookbook is his favorite cookbook, and I was kind of, my mind was
Mm,
blown, because I was like, oh, really? Like you cooked from it? And he made this recipe from it that I still need to make, which is lamb shoulder with lemons.
my God.
It sounds
My
really
God.
good. Yeah, because I
It
love
sounds incredible.
lamb shoulder is delicious. I don't know if you've ever had a lamb shoulder.
Never.
But it was one of the first things I cooked, like when I was getting into cooking. I used to watch Mario Batali, who I no longer, am a fan of for
Yeah.
obvious reasons. But he
Yeah.
had this recipe where it was like lamb shoulder with white wine and garlic and
Oh,
thyme, fresh thyme. And I'd never cooked with fresh thyme before. And you just put it in a pot. And when you braise something, you just put it in the oven, and 3 hours later. But I remember the lamb was like falling apart, and the
oh my God.
herbs. It was just amazing. So I'll make that for you when you come back to LA.
Fabulous. Yeah, I made lamb. It wasn't a shoulder, but it was lamb, like a rack of lamb ribs or
Okay.
something.
Lamb ribs.
And
That's very gourmet.
maybe not lamb ribs, but it was some sort of slab, and there were bones in it.
A
I
rack.
made
Oh,
it
you made a rack of lamb.
a rack of lamb. There we
Yeah.
go.
Okay.
And see how out to sea I am. But I made that for on Christmas, which I know is not a traditional Christmas thing, but I wanted something very involved, because I was alone, and my whole family is in Baltimore, and they're all local, and so they all have been in sort of a pod together, and so they all Zoomed me on Christmas, and it was very hard. It was very lonely and very sad. And I will say, cooking, I wanted like an hours long thing. I just wanted something to be busy with, and something to sort of tend to. And it was perfect for that. It was a really, it took up time. and and there
Whose
and there was a
recipe?
and there was a it was from, I think it was the New York Times,
Okay.
um cooking. I do a lot of those too. I do a lot of,
Yeah.
they love a sheet pan, and I love a sheet pan
Oh
now
yeah, I
too.
just did one last night. I did sausages and
Oh, I saw
peppers.
that.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was good. But rack of lamb, I gotta say, I'm impressed because in my 20 years of cooking, I've never made it because I'm so intimidated because it's so expensive. Like
Yeah.
I don't want
Yeah.
to screw it up or overcook it. But
Oh, I
yeah.
spent some money on that. But I thought it's either that or crying alone on a
No, what a great
Zoom
idea.
Christmas.
And I kind of disagree
Yeah.
that it's not right for Christmas because Craig's dad, my husband's dad, makes it every Christmas. Not on Christmas Eve though. He
Mm.
makes it around Christmas. But isn't and I'm a Jew, so I don't really know. But isn't the lamb like part of the Christ story? Like
It is. It is. No, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I guess I just thought I associate lamb with like Easter. I thought like
yeah,
Easter
maybe
would be
that's it. I
more
think
the
you're right.
holiday to do it. But I mean, I don't know. It was we're making all sorts of new rules, aren't we?
We
So
are.
it was I was thankful for that very long detailed. I thought about doing the Julia Child, the what's the like, not the bourguignon, what's the thing that takes hours?
Oh, boeuf bourguignon or beef
Yeah,
bourguignon.
I thought about doing that, but
That's a
it
great
seemed
one.
I should have. Well, God knows if we're in another wave.
I think you did the right thing.
Yeah,
I think a rack of lamb for yourself on Christmas is kind of beautiful because it's so elegant and
hmm
it's kind of like you were treating yourself, which I like as, something where you needed to make yourself feel good.
been doing a lot of that. Doing a
Yes,
lot of that.
we all have. Well, Isaac, this is a perfect segue into
Yes.
your lunch therapy. So, Isaac, what did you have for lunch today?
I went out. I was feeling festive today in honor of 420, and also Derek Chauvin's guilty
Yes,
verdict.
which we just found out.
Yes. Thank God it went that way.
I know. I was
It
going to
feels.
say, are we still going to do lunch therapy if we need to take to the streets? So I'm glad that it went
Oof,
that way. Yeah.
yeah, thank God. Um, no, I've got a little festive today. I've been doing Martha Stewart Marley Spoon. Martha's been running me ragged uh, with her meal service. But there, so I did a farro, and I'm looking at it. Sorry, I did a farro.
Wait, did you not
White.
eat it?
No, I'm eating it. But as is also, I didn't want to be eating it while we were talking. It's so gauche. But I'm as I've learned while cooking, I continue to just be terrible with time management. So I was like, God, of course I'm running late. I've half eaten it, and it's delicious. But it's a farro, white beans, arugula, and radishes with toasted walnuts, and a lemon mustard dressing. And then I made the Ottolenghi roasted beets with preserved lemon and cumin and a little dill. And
Wow, you get an A plus.
Ottolenghi has been my dom top in the culinary field this whole pandemic. I will do literally whatever he says, and he has me running all over town. I've never purchased so many preserved lemons or so many fucking caraway seeds. I didn't even know what caraway seeds were. Pomegranate molasses. I don't know. He says jump, I say how high, and I find him so sexy. Don't you? Not to put you on the spot.
No, I mean I don't necessarily, but I was going to say Ottolenghi is my safe word. Pause for a laugh.
Have you been to his restaurants? Have you been
I went
London?
when I was in London. I went to like one of his cafes. I was so nervous. I can't explain it. I was in Notting Hill, and everything was so shishi and beautiful. And I walked in there and I was like, oh my God, like, what do I do? Like, cause it wasn't like a restaurant where you go get a table. It was more like a counter and then you order and they had cake stands like piled with meringues and just, it was gorgeous. And he's sort of like a demigod to me at this point. It's like, he can do no wrong. Although his recipes are very fussy, I find.
I made a very fussy recipe of his for like winter. It was like a winter berry sort of couscous thing, and it was admittedly very fussy. Like his intro to it was like, this is fussy, but it's worth it. And it really was. It was all sorts of winter squashes, and it was a lot of chopping and prep. It was a lot of that. But you know what Daddy says, I do, but I went to his restaurant in London right before the pandemic started and had the most exquisite meal I think I've ever had, and it was pretty much all vegetable based. And I'm trying to eat less meat anyways, says the bitch who made the rack of lamb for one.
Well, that's
But
okay once in a while.
yeah, once in a while. And so I just got all of his cookbooks, and it has really been, I don't know, it's been one of the joys of one of the few joys of the pandemic has been doing what he tells me.
Well, as your lunch therapist, one of the things that immediately struck me when you were telling me about your lunch, and I'm also processing what I know about you from reading your wonderful book, Intimacy Idiot, which is
Oh,
hilarious, is your
thanks.
attention to detail and specificity. That as you talked about your lunch, you went into the specifics of all the ingredients in the farro with the walnuts and the arugula and the lemon dressing, and then the beets. And then it made me think about your book about in the chapter about working at the box office at the theater and just all the specificity of the people who came. And so I guess my first question for you is, have you always been obsessed with details, small details?
Yeah. I mean, often to my detriment. I don't think I'm quite OCD, but I do. I am both gifted and plagued with an eye for detail. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
think it makes it very hard for me to be in public. It makes it very hard. I don't know. I not to sound too Larry David about it all, but I lots of things irk me out in the world, um but I like and that has been, not to keep going back to this, but something that I have enjoyed in following recipes is just seeing. I've always loved cooking shows. Actually, I watch cooking shows a lot because I like seeing how things are made. I like
Mm-hmm.
seeing. I mean, I loathe Guy Fieri, but I do like watching. I do like watching those restaurants dump those big tubs of things
Mm-hmm.
together, and
I feel like people have
so
come around on Guy Fieri though, because he used to be like the punching bag for like Anthony Bourdain and all these people, but now it's
right.
been sort of revealed that he like does this all this incredible charity work, and he like
Oh,
feeds
does he?
firemen putting out fires. So not to make you feel
Oh,
terrible, but yeah, I
but
mean,
isn't he also like super racist and
oh,
chauvinist? Isn't
is
that?
he? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I thought there were some rumors about that he's just an incredibly toxic.
Oh,
Um, I mean, not to spread
yeah, my
rumors.
God, this podcast is about to
Um,
get canceled. I'm gonna get kicked off the internet for this.
well,
Uh,
I could be very wrong. Who knows? Who
But
knows?
yeah, back to you. So you were saying it's hard to be
Yeah.
in public, but is that the Larry David thing? So is it sort of like that waiter is like sweating on my menu, or like, I mean, is it things like that, like where you're like curmudgeonly, or is it more that you're just noticing like so many small things? It's like a beautiful mind where like thousands of things are happening and you're trying to take them all in.
It's kind of bad. It's kind
Okay.
of bad. I mean, I do like, if there's someone with their bare foot out, like then that is always immediately visible to me. If there's someone in an enclosed space eating something loudly, that's always apparent to me. And um but I like, and that is something I've really missed about being indoors for 14 months, is I like noticing little things about how people are behaving, or little things about what they're wearing, or um I don't know, it just I think there's so much that makes up who someone is.
Mm-hmm.
um and we so often kind of glaze over um things about, I think, things about people, and we don't take a second to look a little closer at someone. And I think that's something we could all stand to do.
So when it comes to cooking with the specificity of the ingredients and following the recipes specifically to the letter, what how do you handle it when you can't find an ingredient, or you
Oh,
one component doesn't come out the way you thought it would? I mean, does that derail you completely?
kind of.
Yeah.
kind of. I mean, I'm a perfectionist. I really, um, it's, there are a lot of things I've made this pandemic that have really turned out not quite well. Or if I don't have an ingredient, I do try to look up substitutions. Um, but I'm very anal. I kind of like to have, I like to have everything. Um, I like to have everything I'm going to need. It's a comfort. I don't like flying wild. I mean,
No, that's really interesting to me because you're also an incredible writer, and we should mention that you've written for high fidelity, high maintenance, which is relevant because it's 420 today.
yes,
And
yes.
Glow. And so I guess my question is like, because I'm thinking now of you as a writer at your keyboard, like typing into Final Draft, and also you at your kitchen and at the stove, and being deferent to the recipe, but sometimes when you write your own stuff there is no recipe. So I guess I'm curious, like, where does that come from, and what are you channeling there?
It's really, I mean, it's why writing is probably my least favorite thing to do in the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love it. I love having written something. I love getting to the end. I love rewriting. Rewriting is where I feel my most creative. I feel like that's where I do most of the good work, is in rewriting. But I mean, that's when you sit down to a blank page, I mean, there really isn't much of a recipe or much of a guide other than what you've conjured in your head already. And I mean, thankfully, television writing sort of increases the muscles of outlining or beating things out. So you kind of, I mean, not not to beat this metaphor to death, but you kind of learn to cobble together as much of a recipe as you can. And writing in TV, you're not the only cook in the kitchen. See, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
keep this I'm going to keep this metaphor going.
Keep going. This is what this is all about. You're on the right podcast. Yeah.
And so you as a group are beating out a story, coming up with an outline. And so by the time you're sitting down to write, you do kind of have a step-by-step guide of what needs to be created. But when you're on your own, it's very hard. It's very hard. It's very lonely. It's very
Mm-hmm.
solitary. And you just have to have a reward system in place.
Well, it also makes me think of you being a perfectionist, a self-described
Yeah.
perfectionist, because that's the thing about writing. And I'm struggling with this right now. Like, I was trying to write a short story recently. I was like, oh, maybe I'll write like a food short story. And it's like that. I think Ira Glass had a quote about like learning how to getting into write or becoming a writer, and like giving yourself that period of making peace with the fact that it's not going to be great right away. And
Yeah.
now that I've been writing for most of my life, it's like, I don't have time for that. Like,
Right.
like I was trying to write the short story and I was like, this isn't good. Like, this is terrible. And so like, I would stop, and then I'd be like, wait, you're being too hard on yourself. Go back to it. And then like, but then I would see all the flaws again. And I think that's very challenging. It's probably why you find writing so difficult too, is that you immediately are looking at what's wrong with it. And that's hard to overcome.
It is. I was just thinking about this today because I'm working on this screenplay, and I've never written a film before, and it's coming really hard. I mean, I lost my mind for most of last year. Last year was really not a creative year by any means, and so in many ways, I'm quite rusty in terms of the mechanisms of literally just sitting down and getting started, which has always been the hardest part of writing to me, is just the physically like sitting down and doing it. But when you do it so infrequently, you also have no patience for
Yes.
for how bad it is when you first do it. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I just have to get this out. This is going to be a first draft. It's going to be a total mess. But like I said, like I know in my process, it's not until I'm rewriting that I really feel like I can get things closer to where I envision them to be. And so it is so hard to be typing out something that is so far from how I'm ultimately envisioning it, yeah, you just have no patience for it. And the world is so stressful right now. It's like, God, can't something come easy? I don't know. It's you become especially bratty about it these days. And
No, I get that 100%. I mean,
know.
I'm also curious though, like being a discerning person, and being critical of your own stuff. Like when you're in a writer's room, I guess I'm stretching out this food metaphor too, or like in a restaurant, and somebody pitches an idea that's terrible, or a dish comes out and it's not what you wanted. I mean, are you quick to say or to point out those flaws? I mean, I guess I'm curious, do you turn that outwards, or is it only pointed inwards?
I mean, there's sort of an unspoken code in a writer's room of you're really supposed to have each other's backs, and you're
Right.
really if you disagree with an idea, or you think an idea is not great, there are sort of gentle ways to kind of I mean, it's one thing if you're having a sort of open debate about like whether a character would do something, or whether or sort of the ethics of something, if it's a larger conversation, then yeah, I think like openly disagreeing is okay. But it's such a vulnerable thing to be
Mhm.
pitching an idea in a writer's room. It is so scary. I'm terrible at it. I mean, it really just uh one of the many kindnesses extended in a writer's room, I think, is from your fellow writers, just sort of letting your idea kind of go, sit out there and rest in the air. And if it has any legs, it'll still be there in a little bit. If not, it can kind of
Mm-hmm.
scurry back into the hole. But I mean, but that being said, I mean, I do think you also do have a responsibility to share your opinions in a thoughtful way, in a considerate way, but also, you're all there with the common goal of helping to make this show better. So if something, pings you in a weird way, find a way to share that, but you also have to, I don't know, be considerate and be compassionate in the
Mm-hmm.
way that you're sharing it. So
Well,
I
this
don't
all
know.
this all feels like of a piece to me, though, that like there's intense creativity, intense sensitivity, and intense sort of concern for how to marry those things, I guess. Like
Yes.
in terms of like, okay, I'm very sensitive, but I want to be creative, so and whether it's cooking or writing or everything, it's all connected. But now we're gonna do that, like, what's it called? Like in a movie, we're gonna like dissolve now to your childhood and go back.
Oh wow. Oh wow.
Because one of the things that struck me also about your lunch is almost like the neutrality of it, that it felt very like, like you could get that dish, you can get like farro with all of those accoutrements. People are making that everywhere in the country right now. It's not like it's regional. It's not like it's specific to your childhood or a culture. And even when I asked you about restaurants, it felt like there wasn't like, oh, I love Italian food, or I gravitate to the food of my ancestors. So I'm curious. You grew up in Baltimore. So what was your family like in terms of cooking and food?
Very, very simple, very basic. I don't think I would offend either of my parents by saying that neither of them are particularly, uh, prodigious chefs. I mean, that was not really. I've always been sort of envious when people are like, "Oh, my mom's mashed potatoes," or my dad's, steak au poivre. I don't know. When people talk about um, their families cooking, and same for my grandparents. I mean, it was all we were very sort of like basic, like meat and potatoes, uh, sort of green beans, uh, a lot of a lot of chicken, and a lot of sort of just baked chicken. Um,
Okay.
and a lot of like A1 sauce. I mean, it was very, middle class, middle, just middle.
Yeah.
And my grandparents too. I mean, it was a so it's not like there was a sort of dazzling a dazzling palette. Ironically, my mom and I have really bonded in the pandemic over these New York Times recipes, over the Ottolenghi, and she's been sort of branching out and getting more adventurous too, and that's been something we've both been really bonding over. I mean, I do, as I've gotten older, take great pleasure in eating and great pleasure
Hmm.
in wonderful meals, and um, so it's not like I'm a sort of eat to live person, but that was kind of, yeah, that was just kind of how I grew up, like just very simple, basic meals. You know,
Well, so
you
funny. I mean,
it
we should do a sidebar here about your parents, because I've been following all your adventures over Instagram,
ah
and I guess, was it like a Christmas or sometime, they were helping you choose a porn to watch. So
yes.
that's incredible. I mean, tell us more about that. Not that this has anything to do with food, but it's just so
No,
funny to
no,
me.
but it is delicious. I don't know.
Yeah.
They for Ars Nova Theater here in New York was having a telethon to raise money to be able to survive the pandemic, and it was a 24-hour telethon, and they offered me the midnight to 1 a.m. slot because I'm a night owl, which
Mhm.
is why I eat lunch at 5
Oh my
p.m.
God, we never got to that. We have to talk
And
about that
we do
too.
have to talk about that.
Yeah.
Um, but so I was like, well, what if I just do like a real time, like what am I doing between midnight and 1 a.m.? And I was like, well, I'm usually like picking out what porn I'm going to watch for that evening. And I was like, well, how do I condense that to a 1 hour process? Um, so I was like, oh, I should make it like a game show and have special guests and do sort of like a March Madness bracket of like different clips like competing to be the one I'm going to watch. And so I had special guests, and we watched the first minute of all these different porn clips as sort of the setup of, and then my parents were the deciding vote. So they were shown the top two clips, and then they picked, and they picked a pretty wild clip, I have to say, and they're very game. They're very I
Well,
put
I
them
want to
through
hear
a
more
lot.
about that though, because I mean, so much of therapy is talking about one's relationship to one's parents. And
Yeah.
I cannot imagine a world where my mother and father would help me choose a final porn. So have you always had that kind of relationship with your parents where you just talk about everything and everything is open?
Not always. I mean, when I was growing up, my coming out was very smooth. I mean, thankfully I was about the gayest child alive. So they were pretty they were pretty aware and prepped. And any sort of struggle they had with who I was about to be, they kind of did on their own before I even knew. So my coming out was very uh smooth, thank God for them. They're religious people, but they're very progressive religious people. Um, but one of the things that we really struggled over was that I was watching porn. They hated
Hmm.
that I was watching porn, and that was the thing they would sort of catch me with as I was growing up. They would find it on the internet search history. They would find it under my mattress. They would find, they found a VHS in my backpack that a friend had loaned to me from school. I mean, it really, that was the thing we fought over. It wasn't, I wasn't drinking or doing drugs or anything, but I was looking at porn, and as I've become an adult, and our relationship has evolved, I think I've done my best to kind of explain to them that at that point, I mean, this was the 90s, the late 90s into the early aughts, you couldn't see two men kissing or expressing any sort of physical affection for each other in any media anywhere. Like
Hmm.
I remember the Melrose Place where they filmed him kissing, and it was like basically like an aerial shot from the top of Melrose Place, and you
I
couldn't see
remember that
anything.
too.
You
Yeah.
remember that, right?
Yeah.
And 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 that, I think that changed their tune a bit. I think that made them more have a understand sort of where that was coming from. It wasn't necessarily that I was some like fiend for sex. Well, I mean now, but but that I was seeking out just imagery of, you know, some sort of blueprint of like how to enact my desires,
Yes.
how to, and not even just sexually, but just affection. Like, what does two men kissing look like? What does two men touching each other and hugging look like? And where the camera stays on them and doesn't move so you don't see anything. I mean, it really that was the place where we could find it at that point. And I'm so grateful that today's media, I mean, it has a long way to go in terms of representing not just, you know, straight adjacent masculine white cis guys, but but at least it's made some strides in showing young queer kids what affection looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And um I don't know. So it was a real, Adam, it was a real full circle moment to have them pick out porn, because that had been such a thorn. That had been such a real rough spot for us in my adolescence. They
Well, it's
thought, you know,
also
porn is something that, you know, their whole thing was that they were like, we want you to demand respect, you know, when in a sexual situation. And they found pornography to be something where the subjects are not necessarily being respected or valued. Or, I mean, they have a very generational kind of sex negative um view of pornography, and I think that is fairly extended to a great deal of pornography. But there also is pornography that does have an ethic and does have
Mhm.
values, and what's going on, and it is consensual and is informed and and is actually quite celebratory.
It's funny because my
So we're
last
working
guest,
on
we were talking about the ethics of like getting organic eggs versus
it.
like free range. And I love that I'm talking to you about the ethics of pornography. That's really
Well,
interesting. Well, it's funny because it makes me think of our mutual friend Ryan O'Connell, who was the first
yes,
lunch therapy guest, because both of you do something that I admire so much, which is that you are open books about everything. I mean, you put it all
yeah,
out there. And hearing about your parents, like what I love about that story is that they weren't telling you to repress everything, or if they were, I mean, they didn't like that you were doing it, but everything was out in the open. The conversation was happening. You weren't like sneaking around like that kid from the movie Parenthood. Do you remember that
right,
movie with the brown paper
yes,
bag? That was who was like Joaquin Phoenix, actually, right? Isn't that Joaquin
yeah.
Phoenix?
The
uh
VHS they found was in a paper bag though,
yeah,
in
yeah.
my backpack.
Oh, it was
But
okay.
yeah,
But then the conversation was open, and you didn't become one of
yeah,
those people that's like sitting at the library like jerking off under the table.
right, right.
Yeah.
And I have to their credit, I mean, their stance was always, we want you to experience sex as an act of love. Like
Mm-hmm.
we want you to feel loved when you're having sex with someone. We want you to be having sex with people who respect you. And I was like, well, that's not always the point, but sure. Uh, but it can be pretty great with someone who just lives nearby. But it you know, it came from a place of love for me, and I think that has, they're just great parents,
Yeah.
and that that has enabled us to have a real relationship. I mean, I don't think they love always thinking or hearing about my sex life, but I think they know it's a trade-off. They know it means we're close, and that they
Mm-hmm.
know about me. And
And the
yeah,
fact that you're cooking with your mom over Zoom, I mean,
yeah,
that speaks to the way you've kind of made the relationship work. So that's
yeah, yeah.
fantastic. Well, we have a couple things to cover. I want to get back to the 5 o'clock of it all because I have a lot of
Yes.
thoughts about that. But before we get to that, I have to ask in terms of the Baltimore of it all. I mean, are we
Mhm.
talking John Waters Baltimore? Are we talking the Wire Baltimore childhood? Like what was your childhood in Baltimore? Like,
I
were you eating crabs?
Yes, yes, we ate a lot of crabs. I had a very suburban. I mean, we grew up in the suburbs, so it was more. It wasn't John Waters or The Wire, or although those are two of my favorite things. Um, and both watching both of those things make me very homesick. Um, lots of crabs, lots of crabs. Um, which is, you know, I think speaks to one of my loves of a meal about being sort of fellowship with other people and the company of others, and the we would have lots of church crab feasts.
Mm.
That was the summer.
And
So
blue
yeah,
crabs, right? And they're kind of cooked
blue
with Old
crabs.
Bay and all those
Uh-huh,
spices.
Old Bay,
Yeah.
fabulous. And I love that so much. I miss that so much. I'm hoping, I mean, just got shot 2-3 days ago, so hopefully I will be in Baltimore this summer and eating some.
That's
But
great. It's so nice to have a food that's so specific to where you're from. That makes me think of family. I mean, Craig, funny
mhm,
enough, my husband, I'm just saying my husband because people who might be listening might not know that,
I get it. I get it.
is from Washington State. And he's got into some fierce debates with East Coast people about which crabs are better because he's a diehard Dungeness crab, fresh out of the
Delicious.
water. But he thinks,
I remember your stories from last, or I guess not last summer. Was it?
no, it
When
was
did
last
you
summer.
go?
Yeah, we
Oh
drove
yeah.
up to Washington and we went
Uh-huh.
crabbing. But he believes, I mean, he's very what's the word, combative about it, that the simplicity of a Dungeness crab cooked simply in seawater is far superior to the masked grunginess of a Baltimore crab covered in gunk and spices. So you might have to get
That
into a
is
debate with him
that
about
is I will get into a debate with him. He is so ornery that there is
that.
no need. There is absolutely no need. We don't need to have a West Side Story of crabs.
Maybe you
There's
do
room for
actually.
both.
Yeah, I would watch
There,
that. That sounds really good to me.
a very special episode.
Yeah.
No, I love a Dungeness crab too. I don't. I mean, they each have a moment. I mean, I think my allegiance would probably be to just what I grew up with. I mean, it's
Hmm.
associated.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be binary. You can eat both in
Yeah,
2021. Okay, so
yeah,
now let's get to the elephant in the room. This is a very strange part of our conversation, but we need to address it. Tell me
yeah,
about eating lunch at 5:30,
yeah,
because
yeah,
to me that sounds like an early bird dinner.
yeah. Well, that reveals something about you. But
Okay. I mean, I am
no,
from
I'm kidding.
Florida and I'm Jewish, so that is possible. But yes, let's turn it back to you.
No, and this is the perfect occasion for therapy, perfect topic for therapy because I've always been a night owl. That's always been that's when I like to write. That's when my mind feels most sort of tuned in to the right kind of frequencies for writing. But like my ideal schedule has always been like sleeping from go to bed at 4 a.m., wake up at noon has kind of always been my ideal schedule. And then when the pandemic hit, when the quarantine started, and I had nowhere to be, nothing to do, lots of anxiety. I started just I couldn't stay. I couldn't fall asleep. I had to. I was staying up until dawn, and there was something sort of mental for me about. I think to I needed to like see another day starting in
Mhm.
order to like go to sleep. It was
Wow.
I needed to like not to get like too bleak here, but I needed to know that like okay, the sun's coming up, like another day is guaranteed.
Did you really
I
think the
can like
sun might not come up?
well, I think it was just a very subconscious sort of like assuming like a night watch duty or something like I'm gonna take the night watch, and then I would go to bed and sleep until 1 or 2. I would then get a full night's sleep,
Hmm.
but ironically I was sleeping through the day. And this has been a real struggle for me throughout all of the pandemic. I go in and out of sleep training, trying to sort of get back to more normal hours because I don't like being up at night so much these days because no one else is. I mean,
Right.
there used to be like a 24-hour kind of hum to New York City, and
Hmm.
that's slowly returning, but it gets pretty quiet at night. So, but on the whole, I am still waking up. everything's kind of shifted. Like I'm having breakfast at 1, I'm having lunch at 5 or 5:30, I'm having dinner at 10 or 11 or even midnight.
Wow. So you're on a whole
And
other like time zone.
yeah,
You're in
I'm
Isaac
I'm
Central Time.
living,
Yeah.
yeah, Europe hours.
Yes. Well, that's fascinating. I mean, maybe you need to just take a trip to like somewhere where you can like recalibrate based on like the time there
Right.
being where you are. Just
Yeah, I made a
move to,
swordfish. I
yeah.
made a
Okay.
swordfish at 1 a.m.
Oh
once.
my God. What do the
That was a
neighbors,
real dark moment.
do the neighbors hear you like clomping around and like smell fish coming through the vents at 1 in the morning?
I didn't hear any complaints. Hopefully they were all asleep.
That's fascinating. Well, I have to ask, like, did you ever have issues like this before the pandemic, or this is only brought on by the pandemic?
Sometimes, I mean, I if I'm writing, like if I'm working on something, it does it. I will have trouble sleeping while I'm working on something because I get into bed and can't really turn my mind off.
Mm-hmm.
And often if I've been sitting at the computer, from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m., really struggling, really trying to get something down. I mean, it's how it always goes. You step away and then suddenly it comes to, like, I'll then get
Right.
into bed and then it'll all come to me. And so I'll be waking up and writing things down on Post-its or
Mm-hmm.
writing things in the phone. And
That's why I like doing dishes actually, because I always have good ideas while I'm doing the dishes.
that's smart. That's
Yeah.
smart. Um, so I just, it has been sort of situational in the past, but um, the pandemic really kind of brought it to a head. And my doctor is kind of two minds about it. I mean, he has prescribed me some things, and we're doing sort of a lot of homeopathic
This is just like your regular
stuff.
doctor, like your
Yeah, yeah.
physician. Okay.
hmm I've basically eaten an entire meadow in pill form now, um, which does help. Sort of put me to bed. But he's also of the mindset. He was like it's a vicious cycle with the stress about it too.
Yes.
He was like until you have a job again, or until you have places to be, if you're like sleeping through things and missing things, he was like, that's one thing. But if you're just, if you're okay to wake up at 1 p.m., just do yourself that kindness right now, and get the sleep, and and adjust when you need to. But if you don't need to be heaping this stress on yourself right now about when you're sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
um just kind of let your body be. And which I thought was nice, actually. I still straddle a line because I think I it's impossible for me to live without at least a baseline of stress. But
Right. Join the club. Um,
yeah.
but it's interesting because I feel like the solution might be food related, because I once read that when presidents travel to new countries where they do a lot of traveling, or anyone who does a lot of traveling, but this had to do with the president for some reason, the way they get them on the new schedule is they make them eat breakfast at the time of the destination that they're visiting. So if they're in the
Oh,
middle of the flight and it's like breakfast time in the new destination, they will make or it's just anybody can do this. You just eat breakfast at that hour. So like, for example, with you, if in your current, you know, untraditional arrangement, you would make yourself eat breakfast at 8 a.m. and then make yourself eat lunch at 12 and then make yourself eat dinner at like 5:30. And the food will recalibrate your system. This is
do
a
you eat
real.
dinner at 5:30?
No, I don't know. I'm just trying to work within your hours. No, no, okay. Make yourself eat breakfast at 8:30. Make yourself eat lunch at 1 and eat dinner at 6:30. But metabolically, is that right? I don't know. I just feel like psychologically your
Yeah,
system will readjust based on that. This is an
yeah.
official lunch therapy diagnosis for free.
For
I'm giving this to you.
insomnia, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I definitely think swordfish at 1 a.m. definitely confused the hell out of my body. And I do, I don't know. I throw a lot of stuff at this old bag of bones, but it really,
You're younger than me. What are you talking about?
oh, don't you think we've all aged like 5 years?
Yeah, no, I know. It's so funny. Like I just read this article in the New York Times about languishing. Did you read that?
No.
Oh, you got to read it. I mean, it speaks to your situation too, but it's all about
Yeah.
how we've all been languishing during quarantine.
Oh,
That we're not, it's not that we're all depressed or that we're all flourishing. We're just languishing.
yeah.
And it's funny because for Christmas, Craig got me a Nintendo Switch, and I played Zelda Breath of the Wild. And
Which we should talk about in a sidebar, because that was one of truly the only other pleasures of this pandemic for
oh,
me,
you
was
played
that
it
game.
too?
Yeah, I loved it.
I
Loved it.
loved it too.
Cried when it ended.
Me
I
too.
was so sad.
Are you going back and finding shrines? Because now I'm
Yes.
kind of doing
I
that.
I went online. I don't think I would have beaten the game in the time it took if I hadn't gone online and gotten like the shrine map. Because I'm, again, kind of the imperfectionist. I was like, I want to get all of them. I want to pick up all the things.
Oh wait, but you use the shrine map, but doesn't that ruin the pleasure of discovering the shrine?
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah. You got me.
I haven't used that. Maybe I should. I feel like I'm missing so many shrines. Anyway,
You're missing. There are like 120 shrines. You got to use the map.
I know. I skipped over a lot. Okay, well, Isaac, we're nearing the end of this podcast. It kind of flew by. We covered a lot of stuff.
It did. It's so nice to talk to you.
Oh yeah, but it's not over yet. Sorry, you're not off the hook. We've got 10 more minutes. I usually begin every podcast by asking, what did you have for lunch? But I end every podcast by asking, what will you be having for dinner tonight? And with you, there's an asterisk because it's, what are you having at 1 a.m. tonight?
I don't know, actually. This is the first thing I've made myself in a few days, because I had some pretty bad side effects from my Moderna Part 2.
Oh, I'm getting mine on Friday. I'm very nervous.
Block out the weekend.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. I smiled through it all because I was like, it's working.
Yeah.
But it's pretty gross for like 20 hours. But I have another Martha Marley spoon. There's pork chops with like a berry, like a wheat berry kind of glaze, I think. I might do that.
Wait, wheat berry is a grain, isn't it?
Don't quote me on it. It's some berry thing.
Oh, like a berry glaze. So I actually don't even know what Marley spoon is. What is that?
Oh, you don't? Well, it's from Martha Stewart. It's like a meal prep kit. What do you have on the? Do you have like Blue Apron on the West Coast? Do you have
Blue Apron,
like
Fresh Direct, things like that? Yeah.
So yeah, you get it. It's actually quite nice. You can pick out the recipes you want. 3 to 4. Actually, you can go up to 8 meals a week, I think. But I do 3, and you get like they send you like just the amount you need, which is great for my sort of perfectionist. You can sort of spread everything out and have your what's it called, mise. You can get everything
mise en place. Yes,
mise en place.
Yes.
And it's all, and she's got a lot of great vegetarian options and everything. So this farro bean thing was hers.
And then you did the Ottolenghi thing yourself, like you went shopping for those ingredients.
Yes, I got those fresh directed to me. Yeah.
Wait, fresh direct. Okay, you ordered, but you chose what you needed for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been eyeing a spring a whole chicken recipe of his, which I also should make yours. I don't know that I have enough butter, but
it's a lot of butter. I mean, it's so funny because I have been letting myself do whatever I want during quarantine, like literally like make a cake in the middle of the week, roast a chicken with a pound of butter. But now I'm at the moment, I actually just rejoined my gym because I was like, there's no reason to not go anymore because I'm vaccinated. I mean, I'm 80%, vaccinated, and I wear a mask, and it's like 20% occupancy, like nobody's in there. So I just started, and now I'm like ready to like eat salads and be healthy. We'll see how long this lasts. I mean, I don't think it will last very long. But I was going to ask you, with your perfectionism in cooking, do you ever cook for others? Do you cook for
No. And that's what I was going to ask you about, because I am terrified about it.
Really?
I mean, I've only cooked for myself this whole pandemic. I live alone. The Marley spoon, thankfully, only serves 2 people. I mean, I'm usually on these other recipes.
Uh-huh.
It equally hammers home my like singleness, where I'm just like, God, now I have 5 servings. I have to freeze of this.
Oh my God.
Um, but I, I mean, I think there are a couple recipes, and I am planning a trip to Baltimore, and I think I would like to try and cook for my parents because I think
Hmm.
they'd be a forgiving
Yes.
uh, pair. But there are a couple recipes that I've made a few times over the pandemic that I really like, and that I think if I were able to sort of follow them, to the letter, I feel like I could be okay um, handing them out
What
to
are
other
they?
people. They are um, Ottolenghi has actually no, this was a New York Times. There's a New York Times gazpacho that I really love and made a bunch of times. And now that it's spring again, I'm excited to do that. Um, and then Ottolenghi has these roasted beets, um, but also um, oh good lord, I'm trying to remember it now. The carrots. He has these
Oh, yeah.
carrots, the harissa roasted carrots.
I think I've seen that
That's the other
recipe.
thing. Yeah, he's got me up to my elbows in harissa. Um, and um, and then there was I mean, they're all like vegetable. They're all vegetable. Um, there's a black bean and corn salad from the Times that I really loved. Um,
Well,
no,
it's
no,
interesting.
no, no big like showstopper entrees,
But these
but
are all very like, by the way, I mean, I think it's interesting that you're sort of casting yourself as an amateur or like somebody who doesn't cook that much. But these recipes are difficult. I mean, Ottolenghi is difficult. He's not an easy recipe person. I find him very
right.
difficult.
Well, but do you have his book Simple?
Yes, but I get that that's not difficult, but like even the flavor profiles are like
Right, right.
it's like it's not like you're just like putting salt and pepper on a chicken breast and popping it into the oven. Like you're doing
Yeah.
some. But maybe his simple book is simpler because his new one, Flavor. Oh my God, I was gonna make his
Oh, is
celery.
that wild?
Yeah, celeriac or his like celery root steaks, and it's like you have to braise it for 3 hours or like roast it for 3 hours and then sear it and then cook, base it. It's just insane. So much work. And I was like, I'm not doing that.
How was that tofu? I saw you made his tofu.
Delicious. That he
Yeah.
converted me. It's funny because I spoke ill of Ottolenghi on one of my Instagram lives, like kind of secretly. I was just like, his
Oh,
recipes are too hard. But then, funny enough, I went into a Ottolenghi like rabbit hole, and I just started making so much of his stuff. And my friend Jerome has a macroot lime tree that has these macroot lime leaves.
oh,
And so I had him bring over
yeah.
these lime leaves, and I made this topping for black beans that's in Ottolenghi's book, where it's like lime leaves and mustard seeds and garlic and chilies. It was incredible. I'm like, why was I ever, trash
It's
talking Ottolenghi?
he's daddy. You can't trash daddy.
Okay.
No, and I just remember the one thing, the one sort of entree thing of his that I do love. There's a tofu and green beans or haricot vert with and I'm going to mispronounce it, but it's a Persian sauce. Um, Crimea, Chramieh, I think
I don't
it's
know that
spelled,
one. Yeah, I'm not
sauce.
familiar.
It is, I'll send you the recipe. It is, I make that weekly or like every 10 days. And it's tofu, green beans, and then that sauce is absolutely incredible. And
Okay, that sounds
it could go on
delicious.
anything. It could go on, as Daddy says, it could go on anything. You can triple the recipe and jar it and put it on lots of things.
I feel like you
Um,
and Ottolenghi should make a porn together, and then you should show it to your parents.
I would I would do anything for that man.
Maybe don't show it to your parents, but they could at least be aware of it.
They could see the first minute.
Yeah. My final question to you, and then we'll be done. But you've been a very, very generous patient today. Really,
Oh, please.
opening up, which I guess you do anyway, but still, it was very kind of you. But one thing that's not clear to me in all of this is like, what is your favorite thing to eat? Like, what do you love to eat? Like, what if
um,
if you could go anywhere, eat anything, what would it be?
my favorite thing to eat. I mean, I love Italian food. I love Thai food. Um, I love Chinese food. I love Mediterranean food. My favorite thing to eat though is probably a steak. It's
Mm.
probably a really beautiful steak, um, with a great Caesar salad, a glass of a beautiful red wine,
Hmm.
um, and then a really great piece of cake.
I love that. That makes a lot of
that's
sense. Yeah.
that's my favorite meal, and I mean, the closest is the salad and wine is the thing I allow myself to have most frequently. But I really, oh,
I feel like we've
that
come full
that would be my
circle
favorant thing.
because
Yeah.
we started with the lamb, the rack of lamb, and then we spent a
Hmm.
lot of time on vegetables with a excursion into the world of crabs. But now we're ending on red meat again. And you come from a kind
Yeah.
of meat and potatoes family, which is kind of interesting. So, how fascinating! You have a
There's a
little,
huge fly in here.
yeah,
I'm
I
sorry.
know. Yeah, he's here to tell us that our session is now at a close. But Isaac, thank you so much for being
Thank
on
you
lunch
so
therapy.
much.
And when you come back to
Oh,
LA, I'm going to cook for you a steak, a Caesar salad, and a cake, and you'll just bring the red wine.
I'll bring the red wine. Hopefully, it'll be to your liking. I'll go to
Oh,
Silver
yeah.
Lake. I'll go to Luz. I'll go to
Luz is
Luz
great. Yeah. I'm not a wine
and ask
snob.
him.
Yeah. I
I'll
just like
ask him what you want.
fantastic. Well, thank you, Isaac, and good
Thank
luck
you,
getting
Adam.
back on schedule.
Thank you.
All right. We'll
All
talk
right.
soon. Bye bye.
Bye.